again. So in this video I want to talk a little bit about dishonest debate tactics. I believe it was Ben Franklin who said that the only certain things in life are death and taxes. I think a good third item to add to that list would be arguments. And so almost everyone has arguments, or everyone has arguments, I guess I should say. And if you've ever argued, you've more than likely encountered a dishonest debate tactic. So I just like to touch on some of the more common ones. And once you recognize these, it will be impossible not to notice them as you go about your daily life. So probably the single most, and the thing they have all in common, I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'm going to just address the most common ones. But what they all have in common is rather than address the issue at hand or the argument being made, instead the opponent attempts to shift the argument towards something else that's completely unrelated. So, to give some examples of that, single most common dishonest debate tactic are insults. So instead of addressing the claim being made, they will say that the person making the claim is a liar or an idiot or mean-spirited or whatever insult they want to use. Instead of countering the claim being made or the evidence supporting that claim, they simply insult the person making it. Second most common one, in my experience, after that is the straw man. So, straw man is sort of like soldiers will practice bayonet drills on dummies, and so much like the way a soldier can beat up on a dummy made of straw, a person using the straw man tactic, rather than confront the actual argument, they create a fake argument they can easily knock down, and that's what they do. So a good example of a straw man argument would be if someone says that, for example, gun laws don't stop criminals from getting guns, the person will throw out the straw man and like, oh, well, I guess we should just let people buy machine guns then. It's like, see, that shifts it to a completely a topic that's totally unrelated to the question at hand. After the straw man, we have the absurd reduction. So the absurd reduction is to take a situation, or someone will state a claim, and then the opponent will take it to an extreme. So using guns again as an example, if someone says that perhaps there are too many gun laws, the absurd reduction will be, oh, wait, I guess we should just repeal all laws then. You see how they take it to an extreme like that? That's an example of an absurd reduction. After that, we have an appeal to authority. So this is simply saying that a proposition is true merely because some authority figure says so. So, for example, what I believe is true because the Pope says so, and the Pope is God's representative, and there you have it. You can't just say something is true because someone else says so, no matter how qualified that person may be, or how knowledgeable that person may be. Let's see, after that, have the idea of a bandwagon. So the bandwagon argument is sort of like the argument from authority, although instead of referring to one so-called expert, you refer to a multitude of people. It's sort of like the old thing your parents might tell you, is like, oh, if everyone was jumping off the bridge, would you do it too? So an idea is not a good idea merely because a lot of people think it's a good idea. Popularity is not proof of truth. I don't think I need to provide too many examples of that. Although I'd say probably the most famous example from history would be for the longest time, the consensus was that the sun went around the Earth, and it took a long time for that consensus to get changed. Or from a more recent period, about I'd say 70 years ago, there was the theory of continental drift was just coming out, and it took a number of decades before that theory was finally accepted because, again, the consensus of scientists was against continental drift for many decades. Okay, and you have an old stand by the false dichotomy. So the single most common false dichotomy I've heard is when talking about the war on terrorism. If somebody says, well, the war in Iraq was a bad idea, they'll say, well, better fight them over there than fight them over here. You see, it sets up a false choice. Maybe it's not even necessary to fight them, or maybe they could be prevented from attacking the U.S. in another way, or many other possibilities. So anytime someone says there are only two possibilities, it's quite likely they're making a false dichotomy type of argument. Of course, there are situations where there only are two alternatives, but often that's not the case. And I suppose the two more to do for my most common dishonest debate tactics. And I suppose I should also mention that a lot of these sort of overlap with logical fallacies. So logical fallacies and dishonest debate tactics sort of overlap. But I call them dishonest debate tactics because this is where I see them the most. For circular logic, a classic example there is someone says the Bible is true, and you ask them why. He says, well, the Bible says the Bible is true. You're assuming what you're trying to prove there. Or from the recent past, I remember after the stimulus was passed, the unemployment rate continued to go up despite what was predicted. And then when people point this out, they says, yeah, but if the stimulus hadn't been passed, the unemployment rate would have been even higher. Well, how on earth would you know that? So they assume that the stimulus helps the economy no matter what the result was. And I guess the last logical or dishonest debate tactic I have to throw on this list here would be a lot of these have fancy Latin names. I just say them in plain English. I call it the U2 fallacy. So, for example, if someone was criticizing the atrocities that happened in the Soviet Union, the opponent would say, oh yes, but the United States had slavery and the atrocities against the Indians. Like, well, yes, that's true, but what does that have to do with the claim being made? Two wrongs don't make a right. So accusing the other side of having the same fault they accuse you of doesn't prove anything. It's irrelevant to what's being discussed. And that's what all these tactics have in common. They are irrelevant to the issue being put forth. So I hope this was a useful primer on dishonest debate tactics, and happy arguing.